Do you want to know if the Bible or the New Testament exactly is reliable? Lately, I've been studying several books and looking at the history to see if the New Testament is reliable. I don't have all the answers, but as I'm doing this study, you guys could come on this journey with me to see if the New Testament is reliable. Is this something that we could trust and something that we know came from God? I've been reading several books like Jesus and the Eyewitness. These are books I have read in the past, but as I've grown in experience and grown in my Christian walk, because I started my faith very early, so I kind of didn't know much. But as I grow older, I wanted to reread the book. Not only reread the book, but I also read Story as History and History as Story, which is another book that's quoted in that book. And sometimes you just got to read books upon books, and sometimes it's a tedious process. But you have to put forth the effort to study these things. Studying things is not an instant gratification, but it's something that takes time to gain in knowledge and understanding because it's deeper than the surface level. First thing that I'm going to go and address is dealing with the people who don't agree that the Bible or the New Testament exactly historically is reliable. But these people are called the form critical approach, which is those who believe that the gospel spread anonymously, so meaning that they don't know who the author is, that it was all random, like people didn't know. Anonymously, you guys know what the word anonymously means. They believe it's anonymously instead of them being personal testimonies of Jesus' eyewitness accounts, like the book of Mark or John or Luke or Matthew. They don't believe that it's first-hand witnesses, but things that grew over time. The question is, should we trust the Gospels? I think yes. Something that Richard Bauckham brought up, and I'm not only going to talk about his book, I'm going to talk about other books as well, but he's just the book that started the curiosity. We believe that the Gospels were written in the lifetime of the eyewitnesses. And if it's so, that means so much could put in stock into it because they have seen it and seen it personally. And I also want to mention the book that I mentioned, Story as History and History as Story. Samuel, which is the author name, Byerskog, hopefully I'm saying his name correctly, mentions that the case that he makes, which is, in my point, which is an intriguing one, is that history could be written only when events were still fresh, which means that they could still obtain oral reports regarding the event, whether they experienced it themselves or getting the perspective from someone else. He talks about how in order for somebody to be an eyewitness or write some type of history document, the thing that transpired had to be fresh amongst their audience or amongst the person who's writing this history. One of the people that he made, and the video will stop here, but this is just the groundwork foundation, and maybe I could do better explaining, but I just want you guys to get the grasp of everything. And before I get to Polybius and his argument or his way of thinking or how he is an example, I want to build up the foundation that the people who go against the history of the New Testament are usually people who have the form critical approach, who believe that the Bible spread anonymously, that we don't know, that traditions grew over time, and that we're uncertain, right? But I'm coming from the perspective of that these people were eyewitnesses, first-hand accounts, and seeing the risen Jesus in everything else right then and there. I mentioned just yet the things that are found in the Gospels and why we should believe that it happened earlier, but we're going to build up slowly but surely trying to understand these things. But I want to talk about Polybius, and I took some notes on these things, so I'm just going to read off my notes. Polybius said, like medicine, history has three essential aspects. And so I'm going to tell you these three essential aspects. Number one, research, studying documents. The person has to be well studied in this research or in this field. And we kind of see this today. The person got to know what they're talking about. They have to have hours upon hours or even years of studying. Even practical knowledge is important. You need to have practical knowledge, like geography. Do you know where certain places are? Last but not least, personal experience. And I know now and today people try to go away from personal experience from writing history. Sometimes you see some author that mention, these things, their personal experience. But personal experience is like really, really important because you could kind of get you don't want to get somebody who's out of touch a part of that time, but you got to find somebody who's in touch, who has emotional connection. Not saying they're not biased, but you know that they're giving their point of the story in the emotional touch and pull that it had. Polybius was during the time of the Punic Wars. And the traditional view that Polybius has is that first-hand witnesses have direct access to facts. And personal involvement brings insight into the motives and emotions and nuances of an event. And one of the things that usually come to mind when I think of insight into the motives, I don't know if you guys familiar, I'm going off the top of the dome, but I don't know if you remember the story in the Gospels where in the book of John, John said that Judas asked, no, this money should be given to the poor. And Jesus said, you got the poor always with you. And John gives his own commentary saying that Judas didn't say this because he actually cared for the poor, but to show that he was greedy. Kind of see that a person who's involved personally can understand the motives, the emotions, and all those things. John, who was a disciple of Jesus, who knew Judas, who was close by to him, he lived with him for 3 years, he understood things better because he had a connection. If somebody like me, who is writing from far back and writing now, I wouldn't have that connection and I wouldn't know the motives of why he would do it. I can infer his motives, but I can't give you a definite answer of his motives. That's why people put away eyewitness account. They say bias. But bias doesn't mean something is not true. Something could still be true and it could still be biased. Bias does mean you do have to be careful when you see things, but it doesn't mean something is false or not true. This will be part 1, and I will be doing more parts. This will probably be like a very long series, but this is just me learning. I'm just expressing to you guys what I'm learning and what was my thoughts as I was reading, studying, and these things like that. Some of you guys may not have time to do that, so that's why I'm here, so you guys can break down and see my thoughts. You guys can put your thoughts in the comment section, see what you guys think, and yeah, hopefully you guys wanted to tune in, and yeah, this is Expounding Knowledge. Enjoy.